I'm joined on the Crispin Flintoff show by Kit Klarenberg. How you doing, Kit?
Hey, Crispin, how's it going?
It's all good. Thank you for crossing off that rude word on your t-shirt. It's obviously not visible to anyone now. Appreciate
No,
that.
indeed. I censored it specifically on your behalf, and I used your favorite color to do so.
Yeah,
I am nothing if not magnanimous.
thank you very much for that. Now, I've been following on social media this story that's been taken up by lots of people about Gonzalo Lira, the journalist,
Hmm.
American journalist who was based in Ukraine, who was
Yes.
who was telling a lot of stuff about what was happening there that wasn't sitting comfortably with the US or Ukraine. And his story has really been quite shocking and it's not been reported on the mainstream at all. So I thought maybe we could go through that. What I might do just to start is to show a clip of the sort of thing that Lira was doing when he was reporting in Ukraine.
Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. Well, the cokehead of Kiev, because he is a cokehead, the cokehead of Kiev is actually a manufactured political figure. He was manufactured by a Ukrainian Israeli Cypriot oligarch called Igor Kolomoisky. Now, Igor Kolomoisky was the man who owns 1+1 Media here in Ukraine. And 1+1 Media is the company that financed and produced the TV show Servant of the People. And Servant of the People hired Zelensky, a well-known actor in Ukraine, an actor with zero political experience or even any political interest. Well, they hired him to play the role of the president in this show, Servant of the People. Now, Servant of the People had huge ratings, but a lot of people say that it was really weird, the amount of propaganda and PR that was done for the show. It was disproportionate to any other show of any channel. The amount of PR, positive press, and all the rest of it, it was really pushed on the people. Some people say it was completely astroturfed. Some people who know how to speak Ukrainian and who have watched the show have told me that it's a mildly enjoyable show, but no big deal. But anyway, the show was hugely popular. And it ran from 2015 to 2018. And almost seamlessly, Kolomoisky, the oligarch, created a party called Servant of the People, same name as the TV show. And their candidate was Zelensky, a man with no previous political experience and indeed no previous political interest. And Kolomoisky financed Zelensky to the point that Zelensky today is a billionaire. How many actors do you know are billionaires? I mean, I don't think that Tom Cruise is a billionaire and he's the most successful actor in the world, if he's just an actor. Zelensky is more than just an actor. He's the finger puppet of Kolomoisky, this oligarch. And do you know who Kolomoisky also financed to the tune of $50,000 a month, plus additional benefits of different sorts? Hunter Biden. Yes. In 2014, Burisma, the Ukrainian oil company, gas company, hired Hunter Biden to be on its board of directors to the tune of $50,000 a month. Who do you think controls Burisma? Kolomoisky, the same guy who manufactured Zelensky as president of Ukraine. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that. Zelensky and Hunter Biden are spiritual cousins. They are bankrolled by the same guy. It's funny because both of them have drug addictions, pretty serious ones. Both of them get their money from Kolomoisky, and both of them are intimately involved in Ukraine. But here's the difference, of course. Zelensky doesn't have a dad who's president of the United States, now does he?
Kit, there's quite a few things that he says there. I mean, I don't know if you've looked into this detail, but it's Kolomoisky bankrolling Zelensky and Hunter Biden. Is that verifiable?
Yeah, I mean that's true, and I think that what what he states about Zelensky's kind of the disproportionate promotion of servant of the people, which then became the name of Zelensky's political party, is certainly true. There are some indications that Zelensky was being groomed by forces outside the country for power as well. And you got to bear in mind that in the 2021 was it the Pandora Papers, or what do they call them, the Paradise Papers, that was released by OCCRP, which is a US funded quote unquote anti-corruption investigative journalist collective, and it named Zelensky as having a large amount of offshore holdings. I think the timing of that is quite interesting because this is in a period where Zelensky was still trying to fulfill his mandate upon which he was elected via landslide, which was to restore relations with Russia and implement the Minsk agreements to avoid conflict with Russia. So whether that was an attempt to bring pressure on him to not do that, that's a topic for another show. But what you just played is pretty representative of Lira's very revealing insights into the war in Ukraine. And he also posted a lot of stuff that was arguably, well, not even arguably, like quite clearly, like very pro-Russian at a time when the Ukrainian, he was certainly very brave to do so. Because the Ukrainian government, since the start of this, has used the opportunity afforded by martial law to shut down independent media outlets, ban opposition parties, and also, jail journalists. None of these cases really get very much in the way of media attention, but there's a young Ukrainian lad, a socialist called Bogdan Sorotyuk, who has been jailed for writing articles which, while very critical of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, are also very critical of Zelensky, and he's been accused of being a Russian propagandist, and he is now rotting in a high security jail just for expressing dissenting opinions in the public sphere.
The other thing about this I'm interested in is this cocaine and Zelensky allegation. I've seen a few clips on social media of Zelensky sort of doing things with his nose and stuff like that. Is that a smear, or do you think that? Could people say that's just a smear? He had a cold. What would you say in response to that?
Well, he seems to have a cold a lot more than usual than the average person, certainly. And like there has been at the very start of this, there were a few, because he started giving nightly addresses to the Ukrainian people at the start of this, and there were a few where he seemed to be rather worse for wear. Whether that was on alcohol or something harder, I'm not sure. But those allegations have circulated even before the war started.
I don't think the media here are talking about a cocaine thing, the mainstream.
No.
That's definitely the case. Now, I'm just going to go through a bit about more about Gonzalo Lira's story. He's producing these very simple videos of him talking to camera, no kind of fancy editing, no big microphone coming in front of him, no backdrop, nothing, but seems to be getting quite a lot of traction. And then in May, on May the 1st, 2023, he was arrested. This is a picture of his arrest. He was detained for some time, and this is what he says about his detention from May the 1st, 2023. Once inside Sizo prison, I was tortured in 2 of the 4 cells I was in by the other prisoners. Guards never beat prisoners. They outsource torture to the other prisoners. One prisoner actually apologized to me, telling me he had no choice. He wasn't lying. I understood. I got a cracked rib in my 1st cell, but it wasn't too bad. The worst stretch was in my 4th cell. From 1 p.m. on June the 21st until 7 p.m. the next day, 30 hours, I was beaten and sleep deprived, my arms twisted the wrong way around at the shoulders and generally beaten pretty bad. I've taken a beating in my time, so sure, it hurt like hell, but it was manageable. But then at one point, two thugs held my head and used a toothpick to scratch the whites of my left eye while asking me if I could still read if I had just one. That was unnerving. Near the end of this session, one of the thugs struck me in the chest so hard and so repetitively that the beating left a yellow and green splotch dead center on my sternum. He was berated by the cell boss because he'd left a mark on me, which was a no-no. The guard told me to remove my shirt so he could look me over. The bruising was really spectacular, but he just nodded and pretended he didn't see a thing. Perceptions, he'd checked me, right? Why was I beaten to the point of torture? Well, it wasn't over my YouTube videos. I was in prison because of my videos, no doubt. The videos are why the SBU arrested me and put me in Sizo prison without bail. But as they investigated me and examined my computers and accounts, all of which they confiscated and opened, the SBU realized that I'm not poor. So once they had me in prison for my videos, the SBU took the opportunity to extort money from me, using the guards as accomplices, who in turn used the prisoners as the muscle. All told, they extorted 70,000 US dollars out of me and split it amongst themselves. They also took another $9,000 when they arrested me, my emergency cash, and another 11 grand, which was the bail money. With the computers, iPhone, etc., I'm out an even 100K on this adventure. I'm never seeing any of that money back, not even the bail money, because I've decided to leave Ukraine before my trial. My trial is on Wednesday, August the 2nd, and I've already been told I will be found guilty. My sentence will be 5 to 8 years in a prison labor camp. In Sizo, I told an inmate how last year I'd been detained, released, but told not to leave Ukraine. He laughed. They were telling you to leave. This time it looks like the same is happening. They're telling me not to leave, but leaving the door open, or so I hope. Or maybe I'm being set up by them so they can justify putting me away in the labor camp, so no one will ever know about their sordid extortion scheme. I simply don't know, so I decided to die trying. I rode my motorcycle across Ukraine, 1,400 kilometers in 2 days. I'm going to Hungary to ask for political asylum. This is the final video that he released when he had been, about the same time as he was tweeting that, about he was trying to get into Hungary.
The start of the genesis of this whole situation is because I had an opinion that went against the narrative. And that's why I went to prison. And that's why, if I'm arrested again, I will die in prison. So I ask you, please, as many people as possible, the American State Department knows exactly who I am and the situation I'm currently involved in. And they know the fate that awaits me. They know it. You know, they have that saying that, I forget the wording exactly. You know, I'm a little stressed out, as you can imagine, but they have that saying that people are fundamentally good, but for evil to triumph, all you need is the indifference of good people. Please don't be indifferent to my fate. I ask you this very humbly. Please recognize that, well, the literal death that awaits me if this doesn't work out. Understand what's going on.
That was his last video. He was rearrested for breaching his bail conditions after that, and he was jailed. This was I think the last tweet that he put out. It says, "For the truth about the Zelensky regime, Google these names," and there's 7 names there. Once again, if you haven't heard from me in 12 hours or more, put my name on this list. Can you tell us what happened to him when he went back, when they rearrested him and he was back in prison?
Yeah, sure. So, like we at the Grayzone, in particular, my friend and Active Measures, Confederate, Alex Rubenstein, like we were in direct and regular contact with Gonzalo's family, from whom he was actually estranged. He hadn't spoken to his father in many years. His father was also called Gonzalo Lira. So, yes, in effect, his father and other family members had been bombarding the State Department with requests for updates on his welfare in prison. He was being held incommunicado. He had no contact with the outside world. In excuse me, like in January, in the weeks, in the days leading up, 2024, in the days leading up to his death, we were passed a note that Gonzalo had written, and sent to a family member, which stated that he was suffering from severe double pneumonia in both his lungs and edema, and he was not receiving adequate medical care in the prison, and he was so ill that the slightest physical exertion, including talking for a few minutes, was enough to cause extreme shortness of breath up to him, like passing out and losing consciousness. So like it is quite fair to say that he was murdered via deliberate medical neglect. Like it was no secret that he was extremely ill. Yeah, that as I mentioned, his family were specifically raising concerns with the US State Department about his health. I might add that this rather bizarre individual called Sarah Ashton Cirillo, who's an American kind of Ukrainian ultra, who for a while was an official spokesperson for the Ukrainian armed forces, and then was removed from her post after she made a number of completely insane comments that they were going to that Ukraine was going to start hunting down Russian propagandists overseas and killing them. That she took to X to justify his death, and stated that he was effectively an enemy combatant who had put our soldiers at risk and had been working for Russia. Both of those claims are completely false. Yeah, it was absolutely shocking, and I think that the fact that this was, because this is back in January 2024, as I mentioned, the fact that this has been this kind of dropped off the radar. Like, he was a very prominent commentator on the Russia-Ukrainian war. He had an enormous following on social media. Like he mentioned that they found out that he wasn't poor. Like, he made an enormous amount of money from Patreon and other your online donation platforms because of his work. I personally disagreed with him on an enormous amount of things. I never personally had any dealings with him. He was a divisive figure. He had a somewhat checkered past. He absolutely didn't deserve to die in a Ukrainian prison at all. And I think that this does set the, recently, we had another a similar case of this, where my friend and Grayzone colleague Jeremy Lafredo was captured at a military checkpoint in the illegally occupied West Bank, Palestine, and was held on extremely serious charges of assisting an enemy for his factual reporting on the Gaza genocide, and was facing life imprisonment or even the death sentence for his reporting. There were representatives of the State Department who sat in his court hearings in Israel, but refused to make any comment about it publicly. And he was being held in a prison which is notorious for, the rape and torture of Palestinians. He himself states, it's lucky that I'm a white American that I'm alive. You know, like, and were it not for that, for the potential international incident that could have caused between the US and Israel, and also the fact that an enormous number of people bombarded the US State Department and the US Embassy in Tel Aviv with demands for answers and clarity on what happened to Jeremy. Yeah, I mean, you know, he could have suffered a similar fate to Gonzalo Lira. It's the
Barry,
it
can I
kind of
just come in?
sorry, go ahead. Please do.
There's
Please do.
one thing I've looked on Gonzalo Lira at the comments of people who don't support him, who think
Yeah.
you know, they say things that are ridiculous, like he smoked 40 cigarettes a day. What do you expect? You'll get pneumonia, you'll die from that. I mean, or that he's a paid agent of Russia. There's no evidence at all that he was paid
Mm.
anything by Russia, is there?
No. No, no, and I think the point is as well is that, like, I mean, you know, I think, like I said, you know, I disagreed with him on just about everything. I thought that I mean, he had some rather unsavory, to say the least, views about women, and was not shy about making those, like, clear publicly, which I thought was a bit repulsive. Again, like, I mean, it doesn't really justify him dying in prison, but people have pointed to this as somehow, like, you know, reasons that we shouldn't be concerned. No, there's no indication that he was being funded by Russia at all. Like I said, he did take he did take a somewhat a pro-Russian line, although I think the reason that was considered so dangerous in Ukraine is that actually there is a significant proportion of the population that does support Russia, and are welcoming of Russian forces and see them as liberators. This has even been acknowledged by the mainstream media. At the Grayzone, we've reported on leaks where the SBU, in discussions with British intelligence, say the biggest problem that we face is Russia supporters within our country. You know, which says something. I mean, irrespective of your feelings about you know, the Kremlin or Vladimir Putin or what kind of country Russia is, or, you know, why this conflict is happening, it's just a reality that they were very keen to conceal. I also think as well that, like, you know, from the very start of this, Ukraine and its Western backers have tried to frame the conflict in Ukraine as this kind of you know, Nazi Operation Barbarossa style, like, you know, they keep using this phrase, fully fledged invasion. It's actually like a pretty limited military action. Like, you know, we see what total war looks like in Gaza. That's not what is happening in Ukraine. And you know, Lira lived in Kharkiv, which was one of the early contested regions of Ukraine in its northeast. It's historically Russian. It's majority Russian speaking. And he was, like, making video reports from the street showing, actually there's no fighting here. The city is safe. People are going about their business, like, you know, so it rather undermined this notion that, like, yes, that Ukraine was being razed to the ground in this shock and awe campaign. So yeah, he posed a lot of threats to established narratives. A large number of people wanted him shut up. And like I said, I do think that considering the circumstances in which he was in, he was sailing very, very, very close to the wind a bit too often.
Right. No, but the comparison has to be made with Navalny, which is, you know, I'll just show this this screenshot. This is David Lammy on Twitter. Nearly a year after the death of Alexei Navalny, I made our commitment to weaken Putin's attempts to stifle political opposition to his wife. That's Navalny's wife, I think. We will continue to do all we can to constrain the Kremlin. Today's sanctions are to take aim at Putin's inner circle. Now, Navalny's being held up as a martyr, political martyr. Died in custody. Nothing mentioned about Gustavo Lira. Obviously, we saw Julian Assange was in custody for a long time and could possibly have died as a result of that. What's your take on Navalny as a propaganda tool for the West, for those who support Ukraine's war with Russia?
Well, I think Navalny's passing was extremely strange because initially there was a vast rush to convict Russia of deliberately killing him, and his family stated, "Oh well, they must have poisoned him." Biden blamed Putin personally for his death, and then there was a push to pass a Navalny Act in the EU and the US, which would give Ukraine frozen Russian assets, which Kiev has been demanding the West do since the very start of this. And then it was none other than Budanov, Ukraine's head of military intelligence, who said, "Oh, actually, he died from a blood clot." Which is a bit weird. You might think that they would have every interest in blaming Russia. There was a subsequent CIA report which quoted by the Wall Street Journal, which confirmed that he died of natural causes and there was no foul play. Again, you would think that they would want or have every interest in blaming Russia for Navalny's death. I mean, Russia gets blamed for bad weather sometimes. It may be the case they didn't want his death being looked at as a murder at all because he was killed, except it wasn't the Russians that did it. But that's just a matter of speculation. I think it is this level of hypocrisy from Western officials is really quite extraordinary. You just mentioned Julian Assange. Julian was in for the best part of 10 years was in arbitrary de facto detention in a room of the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and then spent 5 years in Belmarsh High Security Prison on 23-hour lockdown. His health problems are well known. I've reported on a variety of both official and declassified reports on his state in the hospital, and it was well known from the moment he went in that he was physically and mentally very unwell. He had a stroke during one of his hearings, and they still kept him there. But Navalny, because he's a Western endorsed good guy, gets talked up. Gonzalo Lira, not at all. And I might add as well that I don't think that independent media has made nearly enough of Lira's passing, because given the ever ratcheting attacks on Palestine solidarity activism, but also people like myself who report on national security matters and are from the UK, it could be almost conceivably, anyone next. If we don't make noise about this stuff and keep making noise about it, it will give the powers that be the impression that they can just get away with this with impunity. We can't let them.